The winter wind howls across the fjord, driving snow before in great swirling clouds that obscure the darkening sky. Inside the longhouse, Bjorn adds another log to the central fire, watching as sparks spiral upward toward the smoke hole in the roof high above. The flames catch eagerly, their light pushing back the gathering darkness, their warmth a blessed relief against the bitter cold that seeps through every crack and gap in the timber walls. This longhouse has stood for 3 generations, built by Bjorn's grandfather when he returned wealthy from raids in the west, bringing with him silver and slaves and stories of green lands across the sea. The structure is massive, nearly 80 feet long and 20 feet wide. Its walls made of thick oak planks sealed with moss and tar, its roof thatched with reeds so densely packed that even the heaviest rain rarely penetrates. The floor is hard-packed earth covered with fresh rushes that crackle underfoot and fill the air with their grassy scent. Along both sides of the central corridor run raised platforms, sleeping benches covered with furs and woolen blankets where the family will rest when the fire burns low and sleep finally claims them. Outside, the last light of the short winter day fades rapidly. In these northern lands, winter days are fleeting things, the sun barely climbing above the horizon before beginning its descent once more. For months now, darkness has dominated, the long polar night settling over the land like a blanket, bringing with it cold so intense that exposed skin freezes in minutes, and even the sea begins to form ice along the shore. The Vikings have learned to endure these dark months, have developed customs and routines that make survival possible and even allow for a kind of harsh comfort. But it requires constant effort, constant vigilance, and the cooperation of every member of the household. Bjorn's wife, Astrid, tends to the cooking pot that hangs over the fire from an iron chain. Inside bubbles a thick stew made from dried fish, turnips, onions, and barley, seasoned with herbs that were gathered and dried during the brief summer months. The smell is rich and savory, making stomachs growl in anticipation. Around the fire, the family gathers as they do every evening when the work of the day is done. Bjorn and Astrid's 3 children sit closest to the flames, their faces reflecting the orange light. Eric, the eldest at 12, is already nearly as tall as his father, his shoulders beginning to broaden with the promise of the warrior he will become. Sigrid, 10 years old, sits braiding strips of leather into a rope that will be used for 100 purposes around the farm. And little Olaf, just 6, plays with carved wooden figures, creating elaborate battles between warriors and monsters in the space between his knees. Also present are Bjorn's mother, Gudrun, an old woman whose hair is white as snow, but whose mind remains sharp, and 2 thralls, slaves captured during raids years ago who had become part of the household, working in exchange for shelter and food. One is a man named Cormac, an Irishman taken from a monastery, who tends the animals and helps with heavy work. The other is a woman called Mare, also Irish, who assists Astrid with cooking, weaving, and the endless tasks that keep a household functioning. They sit slightly apart from the family, their status lower but their presence accepted from the harsh northern winter. Every pair of hands is valuable, and even slaves must be kept alive and reasonably healthy if they are to be useful. The longhouse is not just a dwelling, but an entire world unto itself during winter. At one end, separated by a partial wall of woven wicker, live the animals, 6 cows, a bull, 24 sheep, several goats, and the chickens who roost in the rafters. Their body heat helps warm the building, and their presence means that even in the worst blizzards, the family can milk the cows and gather eggs without venturing outside. The smell of the animals is strong, a constant presence that the family no longer really notices, having lived with it all their lives. Manure is allowed to accumulate during winter, adding its own contribution to the warmth, and in spring it will be hauled out to fertilize the fields. At the other end of the longhouse, near the door, are stored the tools and equipment of farming and daily life. Plows and axes, fishing nets and barrels, everything covered and protected from the moisture that condenses on the cold walls. Hanging from the rafters are bunches of dried herbs, strings of dried fish, and sides of smoked meat, the preserved food that must last until spring allows fresh provisions once more. As darkness settles completely outside, the longhouse becomes an island of light and life in a world of cold and blackness. Bjorn bars the door, a massive timber that slides into iron brackets, sealing them inside until morning. No one will venture out tonight unless absolutely necessary, for the winter night is deadly to the unprepared. Stories are told of men who went out to check on animals or answer nature's call, and became disoriented in the blowing snow, freezing to death just yards from their own door. With the door secured and the fire burning bright, the evening routine begins. This is the time when the Vikings are not warriors or farmers or traders, but simply people, families trying to survive the harsh winter and maintain their humanity in the face of darkness and cold. Astrid ladles stew into wooden bowls, passing them around the circle. Each person receives a portion according to their status and need. Bjorn, as head of the household, receives the largest portion with the most meat. The children receive generous servings, for they are growing and need strength. Gudrun receives a bowl adjusted to her smaller appetite. The ingredients chopped fine, because her teeth are few and weak. The thralls receive smaller portions with less meat, but still enough to sustain them, for a starving slave is useless and likely to sicken and die, representing a loss of valuable property. They eat in companionable silence at first. The only sounds are crackling of the fire and the scrape of wooden spoons against bowls. The stew is hot and filling, warming them from the inside, and for a time, the harsh reality of winter recedes, and they are simply content, fed and warm and together. Outside, the wind continues its assault on the Longhouse, finding every gap, every weakness in the structure. The flames flicker in response to drafts, and occasionally a particularly strong gust sends smoke swirling back down from the roof hole, making eyes water and throats burn. But the house stands firm, as it has stood for decades, proof against the worst that winter can deliver. When the bowls are empty and set aside, the evening's entertainment begins. This is one of the most important aspects of Viking winter life, the telling of stories. In a world without books for common people, without writing that most can read, stories are how history is preserved, how values are taught, how the long dark hours are made bearable. And tonight, as on many nights, it is Gudrun who will tell the tales. The old woman settles herself more comfortably on her bench, wrapping a fur more tightly around her shoulders. Her eyes, though dim by age, still sparkle in the firelight, and when she speaks, her voice is strong and clear, trained by decades of storytelling. She begins with a tale of Thor's journey to Utgard, a story the children have heard many times but never tire of. She tells of how the god of thunder and his companions were deceived by giant magic, how Thor tried to drink the ocean, wrestle old age itself, and lift the world serpent. Her voice rises and falls with the drama of the tale, and the children lean forward, captivated despite knowing how it ends. When Thor's story concludes, young Olaf begs for another, and Gudrun smiles and begins a tale of Sigurd the Dragon Slayer, of how he was tricked into killing his foster father, of how he slew the dragon Fafnir, and won a cursed treasure, of his love for the Valkyrie Brynhild, and the tragic doom that followed. This story is longer, more complex, and as it unfolds, even the adults listen with attention, for it contains lessons about honor and fate, about the consequences of broken oaths, and inevitable working of destiny. As Gudrun speaks, Astrid and Sigurd work on their weaving. A large loom stands against one wall, and on it grows slowly a length of woolen cloth that will eventually become clothing or blankets or trade goods. The work is rhythmic and soothing, the shuttle passing back and forth, the threads interlocking to create fabric. This work never stops, for cloth is essential and its production is labor-intensive. Every member of the family who is able contributes to the textile work. Even now, in the firelight, Bjorn's hands are busy with a spindle, twisting raw wool into thread that will later be woven. His large warrior's hands, scarred from sword and axe, handle the delicate work with practiced skill, for Viking men do not consider such work beneath them. All work that contributes to the household survival is honorable. Eric, the eldest son, works on a different task. He is carving a piece of antler, slowly and carefully shaping it into a comb. The work requires patience and precision, and his father watches occasionally, offering quiet advice. This comb, when finished, will be a valuable item, something that can be traded or sold, for good combs are always in demand. The Vikings take pride in their appearance, in well-groomed hair and beards, and a finely made comb is both useful and a status symbol. The thrall Cormac sits near the animal end of the house, braiding rope from plant fibers. This is mindless work, but necessary, for rope is constantly needed and constantly wears out. His hands move automatically, the pattern so ingrained that he needs no light beyond what filters from the central fire. Beside him, Mare is spinning wool, her own hands busy with the same work that Bjorn does, though her spindle is smaller and her thread finer, for she will use it to weave a more delicate cloth. The hours pass, marked only by the progression of stories and the slow consumption of firewood stacked nearby. Gudrun finishes a tale of Sigurd and begins another, this one about the settlement of Iceland, about her own grandfather who sailed west with his family and livestock, seeking land where he could be free of kings and their demands. She speaks of the voyage across the open ocean, of storms that nearly sank the ship, of whales and icebergs, of the first sight of Iceland's volcanic peaks rising from the sea. She tells of the struggle to survive that first winter, of hunger and cold and the death of the weak, but also the pride of building something new, of claiming land and making it productive through sheer will and backbreaking labor. The children listen with rapt attention, for this is their own history, their family story, and it connects them to something larger than themselves, to the great saga of the Norse people spreading across the northern seas. As the night deepens, the temperature inside the longhouse drops despite the fire. The cold is insidious, creeping in through the walls, rising from the earth floor, descending from the high roof where heat gathers uselessly before escaping through the smoke hole. Everyone draws closer to the fire, and additional furs are pulled around shoulders and overlaps. The cattle in their end of the house shift and low occasionally, their breath visible as steam in the cold air. The chickens are silent, huddled together for warmth in their roosts. Outside, the wind has not abated, and occasionally they hear the crack of a tree branch breaking under the weight of accumulated ice and snow. Bjorn rises and walks to the door, pressing his ear against it, listening to the storm. He can hear nothing but wind and the hiss of driven snow against the wood. He checks the bar securing the door, ensuring it is firmly in place, then returns to the fire. On a night like this, he knows, the trolls and Draug are said to walk, malevolent spirits seeking to harm the unwary. He does not fully believe these old tales, but neither does he discount them entirely, for there are things in northern darkness that defy easy explanation, strange lights and sounds, vanishings and hauntings that old women whisper about. Better to stay inside, safe behind stout walls and a bright fire, letting the creatures of darkness pass by unnoticed. Gudrun has moved on from heroic sagas to more practical matters, reciting genealogies, the long list of ancestors and their accomplishments. This, too, is important, for in a culture that values lineage and honor, knowing one's ancestors is essential. She names them going back 6 generations, telling something about each. This man was a great trader who became wealthy. That woman was known for her wisdom and her skill in healing. This warrior died in battle against the Danes. That farmer cleared new land and prospered. The children are expected to memorize these names and stories, to be able to recite them in turn when they are older, passing the knowledge to another generation. This is how history survives, how the dead remain alive in memory, how the family maintains its identity across the years. As midnight approaches, the younger children begin to show signs of sleepiness. Olaf's head nods forward, and he jerks awake, fighting against the exhaustion that pulls at him. Astrid notices and makes a decision. It is time for the children to sleep, even though the adults will remain awake longer. She rises and begins preparing the sleeping benches, laying out furs and woolen blankets, creating warm nests where the children can burrow down and let sleep claim them. The benches are raised platforms about 3 feet high, with a space underneath used for storage of chests and barrels. The platforms themselves are wide enough to sleep several people side by side, and on the coldest nights, body heat shared between sleepers is essential for survival. Olaf is the first to bed, and Astrid tucks him in with the tenderness that mothers have shown throughout all of human history, regardless of era or culture. She kisses his forehead and whispers a prayer to Frigg, goddess of motherhood in the home, asking for her protection over the sleeping child. Sigurd and Eric follow soon after, though Eric protests that he is old enough to stay up with the adults. Bjorn settles the matter with a firm but not unkind word, reminding his son that growing boys need sleep, and that there will be many years ahead when he can sit up late. With the children settled and drifting towards sleep, the atmosphere in the longhouse changes. The adults can now speak more freely, can discuss matters not suitable for young ears. Bjorn and Astrid talk quietly about the state of their supplies, about whether the stored food will last until spring, or they will need to slaughter another sheep before the season turns. They discuss the animals, which cows are pregnant, and when they will calve, whether the bull is still vigorous enough, or if they should trade for a new one. These are the practical concerns that occupy the minds of farmers, the endless calculations of resources and needs, of planning and preparation. Gudrun, her storytelling done for the night, works on a piece of embroidery, decorating a length of cloth with intricate patterns in colored thread. Her eyes are not what they once were, and she must hold the work close to the fire to see the stitches. But her hands remain steady, and her workmanship is fine. This piece, when finished, will be a treasure, something to display at feasts or to trade for other valuable goods. The thralls, Cormac and Mare, continue their work in silence. They have learned that it is best to be unobtrusive, to make themselves useful without drawing attention. For a slave's life depends on the goodwill of their masters. They are not treated cruelly in this household. Bjorn is not a harsh master, and Astrid is a fair mistress. But they are also not free, and they live with the knowledge that their lives could change drastically if they anger their owners or if the family's fortunes decline. For now, they are fed and sheltered, and that is more than many slaves can say. Around the first hour past midnight, Bjorn banks the fire, arranging the logs so they will burn slowly through the night, providing warmth without needing constant attention. He knows the art of fire management well, knows how to position logs for maximum heat and minimum consumption, knows how to keep a fire alive through the long winter night, without waking every hour to tend it. The fire will not go out. That would be disaster. For rekindling it will be difficult, and the coal will become dangerous. But neither will it rage wastefully, consuming precious fuel. With the fire properly set, the adults too begin to prepare for sleep. Astrid and Bjorn will take the sleeping bench on the north side of the house, the position of honor for the head of household and his wife. Gudrun sleeps on the south side, near enough to the fire to benefit from its warmth. The thralls sleep at the far end, near the animals, the least desirable position but still protected and warm enough to survive. Before lying down, Bjorn performs a final check of the longhouse, walking its length, inspecting the walls for any new cracks or gaps where wind might penetrate, checking that the food stores are secure from mice and rats that grow bold in winter, ensuring that the animals have water and fodder. Everything is as it should be, and he returns to the central area where Astrid waits. They remove their outer layers of clothing, stripping down to their wool undergarments, and climb onto the sleeping bench. The furs there are thick and soft, collected over years, bear and wolf and seal, each one a story of a successful hunt. They pile these over themselves, creating a cocoon of warmth. Despite the insulation, they can still feel the cold air on their faces, can see their breath misting in the dim light of the fire. Astrid moves close to Bjorn, sharing body heat, and he wraps an arm around her. They lie in comfortable silence for a time, listening to the sounds of the longhouse settling for the night. The fire crackles softly. The animals shift and breathe. The wind continues its assault on the exterior walls. From the children's bench comes the sound of deep, even breathing, the sleep of the young and innocent. Bjorn finds himself thinking about the coming year, about the work that will need to be done when spring finally arrives. The fields will need to be plowed and planted. The longhouse itself needs repairs, new thatch for the roof where winter storms have damaged it, and some of the wall planks are rotting and should be replaced. There will be fishing once the ice breaks, and trading voyages to other settlements to exchange surplus goods for things they need. And if the omens are favorable and the Jarl calls for it, there may be a raid, a chance to win silver and glory in the warm southern lands. Bjorn is getting older now, 35 winters, and he knows his raiding days are numbered, but he feels he has a few good years left in him, a few more chances to prove himself in battle and bring home well for his family. Astrid's thoughts run in different channels. She thinks about Sigrid, who is approaching the age when she will begin to attract suitors. In a year or two, men will come asking for her hand, and Astrid will need to evaluate them carefully to determine which will make the best husband, which will treat her daughter well, and provide security and status. She thinks about Eric, who is becoming a man and will soon begin the formal training that will make him a warrior. Bjorn has already spoken of sending him to foster with a neighboring Jarl, a man known for his skill in arms and his success in battle. It is a good opportunity, but Astrid will miss her son, will worry about him constantly, for the training is hard and dangerous, and not all boys survive it. And she thinks about little Olaf, still so young, still needing his mother's care and attention. The years pass so quickly. She reflects, it seems like just yesterday that Eric was Olaf's age, and now he is nearly a man. Soon enough, Olaf too will grow, will become a warrior or a farmer or a trader, will leave to make his own way in the world. Such is the nature of life, this constant cycle of growth and change, of children becoming adults and adults becoming elders and elders passing into memory. The fire burns lower, the flames diminishing to a steady glow of coals that provides less light but still adequate heat. The longhouse dims, shadows growing deeper in the corners, the high rafters disappearing into darkness. This is the deepest part of the night, the hours when sleep should be easiest, when the body's natural rhythms demand rest. And indeed, one by one, the inhabitants of the longhouse surrender to sleep. Gudrun is the last of the adults to succumb, her old body less needful of sleep than younger ones, but eventually even she closes her eyes and her breathing becomes slow and regular. Now the longhouse is truly at rest, all its human inhabitants lost in dreams, while outside the winter night continues its reign over the frozen land. But even in sleep, life continues. The fire, though burning low, still provides warmth and light. The animals breathe and shift, their presence a constant reminder of the agricultural foundation of Viking life. And in the dreams of those who sleep, other worlds come alive. Bjorn dreams of battle, as he often does, reliving old raids and imagining new ones. In his dream, he stands on the prow of a longship, the wind in his face, the sea spray cold and sharp. Around him, his crew rows in perfect rhythm, their oars cutting the water cleanly, driving the ship forward at remarkable speed. Ahead lies a coastline, green and fertile, a land ripe for plunder. They beach the ship and leap onto the sand, weapons ready, and sweep inland toward a village that has no warning of their approach. The raid plays out as raids do, a mixture of violence and calculation, of terror and triumph. They take what they can carry, silver and gold, fine cloth and weapons, food and livestock. They fire the buildings they cannot loot and return to their ship with their prizes. No one pursues them, for they are gone before any organized resistance can form. The dream shifts as dreams do, and now Bjorn is back home, distributing the plunder among his crew, his own share substantial enough to ensure his family's comfort for another year. His neighbors look at him with respect, for he is a successful warrior, a man who brings wealth from distant lands. The Jarl himself nods in approval, acknowledging Bjorn's contribution to the community's prosperity. It is a good dream, a satisfying dream, and Bjorn sleeps deeply, a slight smile on his weathered face. Astrid's dreams are different, centered on home and family rather than adventure and glory. She dreams of summer, of the brief warm months when the sun barely sets and the world explodes into frantic growth. In her dream, the fields are green with growing crops, and the air is warm and sweet with the scent of wildflowers. Her children play in the meadow, laughing and chasing each other, healthy and happy and safe. She is working in her garden, tending the vegetables and herbs that supplement the family's diet, and the work is pleasant, the sun on her back, the earth rich and productive under her hands. Bjorn is there too, working in the field beyond the garden, and she can hear him singing as he works, old songs from his youth, his voice strong and sure. It is a vision of peace and prosperity, of the life she has built and continues to maintain through her daily labor, and it brings her deep contentment. Young Eric dreams of glory, as young men have always dreamed. In his dream, he is fully grown, a mighty warrior feared by his enemies and respected by his peers. He wears fine armor and carries weapons of exceptional quality, gifts from jarls and kings grateful for his service. He has sailed to distant lands and fought in great battles. He has won treasure and fame. Beautiful women admire him, and powerful men seek his counsel. He is everything he hopes to become, everything his father has been and more. For each generation must surpass the last, or what is the point of living? The dream is vivid and exciting, full of action and drama, and Eric shifts in his sleep, his hands twitching as if gripping a sword, his lips moving in silent battle cries. Sigrid dreams of something she does not fully understand yet, a dream of a young man she has not met, someone tall and strong and kind, who looks at her with admiration and affection. In her dream, they are walking together along the shore of the fjord, talking easily about everything and nothing, comfortable in each other's presence. He gives her a gift, a beautifully carved brooch, and she accepts it with a shy smile. Her mother is there too, approving, and Sigrid knows that this is someone her family accepts, someone appropriate and worthy. It is a dream of future possibilities, of the life that awaits her in just a few short years, and it fills her with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, for adulthood approaches whether she feels ready or not. Little Olaf's dreams are simpler, the uncomplicated dreams of childhood. He dreams of playing with the farm dogs, of riding on his father's shoulders, of his mother's cooking, of the wooden toys his father carved for him. There are no deeper meanings or anxieties in his dreams, just the pure joy of a child who feels loved and secure, who knows his place in the world and is content with it. The thralls, too, dream, though their dreams are colored by their status and their history. Cormac dreams of Ireland, of the monastery where he once lived before the Vikings came. He sees again the stone chapel, the illuminated manuscripts he once worked on, the peaceful rhythm of prayer and work that structured his days. He dreams of the moment the Vikings attacked, the terror and chaos, the death of his brothers, his own capture and enslavement. But his dream does not end in darkness. Instead, it shifts forward, and he sees a possible future, a day when he might win his freedom, might return to his homeland, might rebuild some version of the life that was taken from him. It is a dream born of hope, fragile and perhaps unrealistic, but necessary for survival. For without hope, even the strongest spirit withers and dies. Mare dreams of her children, taken from her when she was captured, scattered to other owners, or perhaps dead. She does not know which. In her dream, she finds them again, grown but still recognizable, and they run to her with joy and tears. And she holds them and knows that despite everything, despite years of separation and suffering, they are still family, still bound by love that slavery cannot break. It is a painful dream, for it reminds her of all she has lost, but it is also a necessary dream, for it keeps alive the part of her that is more than just a slave, that is still a mother, still a person with her own history and identity. The dreams continue, weaving through the sleeper's minds, sometimes pleasant, sometimes troubling, but always personal, always meaningful. For dreams are where the unconscious mind processes a day's events, where fears are confronted and desires explored, where the soul speaks in symbols and metaphors. And in the Longhouse, surrounded by family and shelter from the winter storm, the dreamers are safe to explore these inner landscapes without fear. The hours of deep night pass slowly. The fire continues its slow burn, the coals glowing red and orange, pulsing gently as if breathing. The temperature in the Longhouse has dropped further, and frost begins to form on the interior walls where moisture from breath and bodies condenses on the cold wood. But under the furs, the sleepers remain warm enough, their body heat trapped by the layers of insulation, their breathing slow and deep. Around the third hour past midnight, one of the cows shifts position and makes a low sound, not distress but just announcing her presence, reminding the world that she exists. The sound is loud enough to partially wake Gudrun, whose sleep is lighter than the others. She opens her eyes and lies still for a moment, listening to the sounds of the Longhouse. She hears the breathing of her family, the crackling of the fire, the wind outside. Everything sounds normal, and she closes her eyes again, but sleep does not immediately return. This is common for the elderly, this pattern of waking and sleeping in short cycles rather than the deep, uninterrupted sleep of the young. Gudrun does not mind. She has lived long enough to be comfortable with wakefulness, to use these quiet moments for reflection and memory. She thinks about her life, about the long journey from girlhood to old age. She remembers her own mother and grandmother, both long dead, and wonders if they watch over her still from Valhalla or whatever afterlife exists. She thinks about her husband, dead these 15 years, killed in a raid when a Saxon spear pierced his lung. She misses him still, misses his presence and his voice, the way he would wrap his arm around her at night, just as Bjorn now holds Astrid. But she has learned to live with loss. For everyone who lives long enough must bury people they love, must carry on alone after companions fall away. This is a price of survival, this accumulation of grief, But it is a price she pays willingly, for the alternative is to die young, and she has too much love for life to welcome death before her time. She thinks about her grandchildren sleeping nearby, about the future they will inherit. Eric will grow to be a fine man, she believes, strong like his father, but perhaps with more wisdom. For the world is changing, and warriors who can also think will be more valuable than those who can only fight. Sigrid will make a good match, will bear children of her own, will continue the family line. And Olaf, little Olaf, who knows what he will become? The youngest children are always the mystery, for so much can happen in the years between childhood and adulthood. Perhaps he will be a farmer like his father, or perhaps he will choose a different path, become a trader or a craftsman, or even a skald, a poet who composes verses and keeps the old stories alive. Whatever he becomes, Gudrun hopes she will live to see it, though she knows her time grows short. She is old, older than most people live to be, and she can feel her body wearing out, joints that ache constantly, vision that dims, hearing that fails. But her mind remains clear, and for that, she is grateful. After perhaps half an hour of these quiet reflections, sleep claims Gudrun again, pulling her back down into unconsciousness. The Longhouse returns to its state of complete rest, all inhabitants sleeping, all dreams unfolding in private internal theaters. Outside, the storm begins to abate somewhat. The wind dies down to a less ferocious level, and the snow falls more gently, large flakes drifting down rather than being driven horizontally. The world takes on a muffled quality, all sound absorbed by the accumulating snow, creating a silence so profound it is almost eerie. This is the heart of winter, the deepest darkness, the time when the earth seems to hold its breath and wait for the sun's return. But that return is still months away, and the Vikings know they must endure, must survive, must maintain their households and their humanity through the long, cold months ahead. Inside the Longhouse, life continues its patient rhythm. The fire burns, the people sleep, the animals breathe and dream their animal dreams. This is survival at its most basic. The fundamental activity of staying alive, of maintaining warmth and shelter, of conserving energy and waiting for better times. The hours before dawn are the coldest, the time when the fire is at its lowest and when the chill penetrates deepest. Even under the firs, the sleepers shift and burrow deeper, instinctively seeking warmth. Astrid wakes briefly and notices that the fire has burned lower than ideal. She considers rise and add wood, but decides against it, for she is warm enough on the firs, and moving will expose her to the cold air. The fire will last until morning, and morning is not far off now. She can sense this even in the darkness, some internal clock telling her that dawn approaches. She settles back against Bjorn's warm bulk and drifts back to sleep. Around an hour before dawn, Eric wakes. He lies still for a moment, confused about why he has woken, for the Longhouse is still dark and silent. Then he realizes what has pulled him from sleep. He needs to urinate. He groans inwardly, for the last thing he wants is to leave the warm sleeping bench and venture into the cold. But the pressure in his bladder is insistent, and he knows from experience that trying to ignore it will only make sleep impossible. With great reluctance, he pushes back the furs and sits up. The cold air hits him like a physical blow, shocking after the warmth of the bed. He can see his breath misting in the dim light from the fire's embers. Moving quickly to minimize exposure, he climbs down from the sleeping bench and makes his way to the door. Unbarring it takes effort, for the massive timber is heavy and his cold, stiffened muscles protest the work. Finally, he gets it free and pushes the door open. A blast of frigid air rushes in, and Eric steps quickly outside, closing the door behind him to prevent more cold from entering. Outside, the world is transformed. Snow covers everything, lying thick and white and pristine under a sky that is beginning to show the first hints of approaching dawn. The stars are fading, and the eastern horizon shows a band of lighter sky. The storm has passed completely, and the air is still and clear and brutally cold. Eric quickly does what he came out to do, his urine steaming in the cold air and quickly freezing where it hits the snow. He has to be careful, for exposed skin freezes quickly in such temperature, and there are stories of men who were not careful enough and suffered frostbite in unfortunate places. Task completed. He hurries back inside, bars the door again, and rushes to the sleeping bench. He burrows back into the furs. shivering violently, his skin like ice where it was exposed. Gradually, the furs warm him again, and he lies awake for a while, watching the dim glow of the fire, thinking about nothing in particular. Eventually, sleep reclaims him, but it is a lighter sleep now, for his body knows that morning approaches, and it is time to begin preparing for wakefulness. Within the longhouse, subtle changes begin. The quality of light changes as dawn grows nearer, the darkness becoming less absolute even though the sun has not yet risen. The animals sense the approaching day and begin to stir. The cows shift and low softly. The chickens rustle in their roosts and make quiet, clucking sounds. These noises, though soft, are enough to begin pulling the sleepers toward wakefulness. Bjorn wakes first among the adults, as he usually does. He is accustomed to rising early. To beginning the day's work before the sun is fully up, he lies still for a moment, assessing the situation. The fire needs attention, that much is clear, and the day's work will not do itself. With a quiet sigh, he extricates himself from Astrid's sleeping form in the pile of furs, moving carefully to avoid waking her, though she stirs and murmurs in her sleep. The cold air is a shock, but Bjorn is used to it, has experienced it countless times. He pulls on his outer layers of clothing quickly, wrapping himself against the chill, and makes his way to the fire. The coals are still alive, glowing faintly, and he adds kindling carefully, blowing gently to encourage flames. Soon, the fire catches and begins to burn more vigorously. He adds larger pieces of wood, building the fire back up to a level that will warm the longhouse and allow cooking. As light and warmth increase, the other adults begin to wake. Astrid rises and immediately begins preparing the morning meal, for the household will need food to fuel the day's work. She adds water and oats to a pot and hangs it over the fire to cook into porridge. Gudrun wakes and sits up slowly, old joints protesting. But she manages to rise and begin her own contributions to the household work. The thralls wake and immediately start their assigned tasks, knowing that their survival depends on being useful and obedient. Within a short time, the longhouse is fully awake and active. The children are roused, protesting sleepily but knowing that argument is futile. They dress and join the family around the fire, drawn by the warmth and the smell of cooking food. Outside, the sun finally breaks the horizon, sending golden light across the snowy landscape. Another night has passed. The family has survived, and now the work of another day begins. The morning meal is simple but nourishing. Oat porridge sweetened with a little honey, dried fruit mixed in for flavor and variety. There is also bread from the previous day's baking, now slightly stale, but still good when dipped in warm milk fresh from cows. The family eats together, sitting around the fire, bowls cradled in hands for the warmth as much as the food. Conversation is minimal at first, for people are not yet fully awake, but gradually talk begins. Bjorn discusses the day's tasks with Eric and Cormac. The animals need to be tended, the cows milked, the sheep checked for any problems, fresh bedding laid down where the old have become too soiled. Firewood needs to be brought in from the supplies stacked outside under shelter. The roof should be checked to ensure no damage occurred during the night storm. Water needs to be brought up from the well, a task made difficult by the fact that ice forms quickly and must be broken through to reach the liquid water below. Astrid and Mare discuss the household work. Bread needs to be baked, for the family consumes large quantities, and the baking must be done regularly. The looms await, for the weaving never stops. Cloth always needed for clothing, trade, and 100 other purposes. Washing must be done, though in winter this is difficult and infrequent, for water is hard to come by, and heating it in sufficient quantity for laundry is a major undertaking. The children are assigned their own tasks appropriate to their age and ability. Sigrid will help with the weaving and the food preparation. Olaf will gather eggs from the chickens, feed the dogs, and help with other small tasks. Even the youngest must contribute, for survival requires the labor of all. As the meal concludes and people prepare to begin their work, Gudrun makes an announcement. Tonight, she says, she will tell the story of Ragnarok, the doom of the gods and the end of the world. This is a story she tells only occasionally, for it is long and complex and somewhat dark, not the usual fare for entertainment. But it is an important story, one that every person should know, for it speaks of fate and courage, of fighting on even when defeat is certain, of maintaining honor in the face of inevitable doom. The children's eyes widen with excitement, for this is a rare treat. Even the adults look interested, for though they have heard the tale before, Gudrun is a masterful storyteller, and her version of Ragnarok is particularly vivid and moving. They go about their morning tasks with something to look forward to, the promise of the evening's story making the work seem lighter. Bjorn and Eric dress warmly and venture outside to check on the condition of the farm after the storm. The snow is deep, coming up to their knees in places, and walking is difficult. They check the animal shelter first, a separate building where some of the livestock are kept, those animals hardy enough to survive in less protected conditions. Everything seems fine. The structure held up well against the storm, and the animals, though cold, are alive and reasonably healthy. They move on to inspect the other outbuildings, the storage sheds, and the workshop where tools are kept and repairs are made. One shed has suffered some damage. A corner of the roof partially collapsed under the weight of snow and ice. Bjorn makes a mental note to repair it as soon as possible, for leaving it damaged will only allow further deterioration. They clear snow from around the door of the longhouse, piling it to either side, creating a path. This is necessary work, for the snow will continue to accumulate throughout winter, and without regular clearing, it could eventually pile high enough to block the door entirely, trapping them inside. After an hour or so of outside work, they return to the longhouse, their faces red from cold, their beards frosted with ice from their frozen breath. But the work has been done, and they can now warm themselves by the fire and move on to indoor tasks. Inside, the women have been busy with their own work. Astrid has mixed dough for bread and set it to rise near the fire, where the warmth will help the fermentation process. Mare has been spinning, her pile of finished thread growing steadily. Gudrun has been working on a piece of tablet weaving, creating a narrow band of intricately patterned cloth that will be used to trim a garment or perhaps to tie back hair. Sigrid has been practicing her weaving on a small practice loom, her young hands not yet skilled enough for the main loom, but improving with every session. The day proceeds in this manner, work alternating with brief periods of rest and refreshment. Around midday, another meal is served, this time a soup made from yesterday's leftovers enhanced with fresh ingredients. The afternoon brings its own rhythm. Bjorn works on repairing a broken axe handle, carefully shaping a new piece of ash wood to fit the metal head perfectly. This is skilled work, requiring patience and attention, for a poorly fitted handle can break during use, potentially causing injury. Eric practices with his weapons, going through the forms his father has taught him, building muscle memory and strength. In a few years, he will join the men in their training sessions, learning the deadly art of combat that may one day save his life or win him glory. But for now, he practices alone, swinging a wooden sword at imaginary enemies, his movement still somewhat clumsy but improving. The women continue their textile work, the endless production of thread and cloth that keeps the household clothed and provides trade goods. This work is so constant, so fundamental to Viking life, that it has become almost meditative, hands moving in familiar patterns while minds are free to wander or to engage in conversation. Astrid and Gudrun talk about family matters, about relatives in other settlements, and how they are faring this winter. They discuss marriages being arranged, children being born, old people dying, the normal flow of life that continues regardless of season or weather. As the short winter day draws toward its close, the sun already beginning its descent, though it is barely mid-afternoon by the reckoning of longer days, the family begins to prepare for another evening. The animals are fed and watered. The fire is built up. The evening meal is prepared. Tonight a special treat. A chicken has been slaughtered and will be roasted over the fire. The meat a welcome change from the usual fish and porridge. The family gathers as they did the previous night, drawn together by the fire and by their bonds of kinship and shared survival. They eat the chicken with appreciation, savoring every bite. For such meals are rare in winter when every animal that dies represents a loss to the household's resources. But occasionally, a treat is necessary, something to lift spirits and remind everyone that life offers pleasures as well as hardships. With the meal concluded, the anticipation builds for Gudrun's promised story of Ragnarok. She settles herself, wraps her furs around her shoulders, and begins to speak. Her voice takes on a different quality when she tells the great myths, becoming deeper and more resonant, as if she channels something ancient and powerful. She begins with the signs of the coming doom, the Fimble winter. 3 years of unrelenting winter with no summer between, of moral decay and family bonds breaking down, of wolves devouring the sun and moon. She tells of the Midgard serpent rising from the ocean, of the wolf Fenrir breaking free from his chains, of the fire giants marching from Muspelheim, led by Surt with his flaming sword. She describes the gods arming for their final battle, knowing they will lose but fighting anyway because that is what honor demands. Thor faces a serpent and kills it, but dies from its venom. Odin is swallowed by Fenrir, but is avenged by his son Vidar. Freyr fights Surt, but falls because he gave away his sword for love. Heimdall and Loki kill each other in single combat. The gods die, the world burns, and everything sinks into the sea. But Gudrun does not end the story there, in despair and destruction. She continues with a renewal, telling how the earth rises again from the water, green and fertile, how a few gods survive and a human couple sheltered in the wood emerge to repopulate the world. From destruction comes rebirth, from death comes new life, and the cycle continues. The story takes more than an hour to tell, and throughout, the family listens with complete attention. Even little Olaf, who does not understand all the complex theology and symbolism, is captivated by the drama and the emotion. When Gudrun finally falls silent, there is a long moment of quiet as everyone processes what they have heard. Then Bjorn speaks, thanking his mother for the tale, and the spell is broken. But something has changed in the atmosphere of the Longhouse. The story of Ragnarok, with its themes of courage in the face of inevitable defeat, of maintaining honor even when all is lost, has reminded them of who they are, of the values that define Viking culture. They are a people who do not shrink from hardship, who face even doom with weapons in hand and courage in their hearts. This winter, hard as it is nothing compared to the trials the gods face, and if the gods can maintain their dignity and fight to the last, surely mortals can endure a few months of cold and darkness. The evening continues with lighter stories, with songs and riddles, with the comfortable companionship of family. One by one, the children drift off to sleep, and eventually the adults too retire to their beds. Another day ends, another night begins, and the cycle continues, as it has continued for generations, as it will continue for generations to come. The endless rhythm of survival and endurance that defines human existence in the harsh northern world.